Welcome to Future Customer Value, where global thought leaders share their career-defining moments.
Ezra Zimbler, thank you so much for joining Future Customer Value, the show that where we interview global leaders and their perspectives on the moments that define their career when it comes to value. So thanks so much for hopping on and excited to chat with you.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So for our audience, Ezra's got a really fascinating journey, y'all, going from sports sales in the US after graduating from UMich and then transitioning to an account management role, short stop before he was recruited by LinkedIn to basically run a number of customer success, post-sales, and community initiatives at the company we are all intimately familiar with. That journey also led Ezra to hop across the big ocean from North America to Dublin. So the past, I think, what, 6-7 years, more than that. You've
Almost
been
five,
based,
yeah.
yeah, 5-6 years in Dublin. So living that expat life and having a world view into a very large and successful company across two different continents. So really excited to dive in today, Ezra, and hear more about your journey over the past 10 years.
Excited to share more.
Awesome. Well, the first question I wanted to dive into here, Ezra, is your journey through LinkedIn professionally. And curious to hear your thoughts on how has LinkedIn evolved over the past time you've been there from a post-sales perspective strategically, and what are some of the nuances that have shaped this reality today?
Man, it's been a crazy journey. So again, about to hit 9 years at LinkedIn, and I would say where we are today and where we are when I started is the foundations are somewhat similar, but I think, a lot of the things we do are much different. And I think we've really changed for the better recently. But let's start at the beginning. Love that. So I came in at LinkedIn. I was a CSM with some of our small business customers. I'm really rolling up my sleeves to see, pretty large book. How can we really engage these folks? But we didn't really at that point have a strong model or like a really built out hypothesis on like how do we bring value to these customers? It was more, hey, we're going to bring in this team to focus on SMB to try to bring as much value and see what happens. Which again, early days of customer success, I think it made a lot of sense. You're trying to figure it out. You want to try a lot of things to see what works and what doesn't. And so that first year was fascinating. So I was paired one-to-one with a salesperson. We had a book of around 200 accounts, and it was like, get in there, start talking to them, start learning, and for that year, so of my 9 years of LinkedIn, that first year was the only one where we were gold on revenue. So I had a churn target that I was associated with, and kind of that was the focus of our team: is can we reduce churn for your book of business? So I enjoyed that year. It was a lot of I was brand new to customer success, brand new to LinkedIn, brand new to the recruiting world, which is where LinkedIn plays in our biggest business line. So for me, it was a lot of learning. And as I mentioned, like the guardrails weren't totally there yet. So it was really, try out what you want, try different methods, but it's like get in front of your customers, spend time with them, learn what they need, and try to keep them from churning and, hopefully work with your sales partner for them to grow into, some of these bigger customers. And it was very funny those first couple of years, like I want to say September or October or so, you would kind of be waiting for the announcement of like, what is the next year's model going to be? For customer success. Like the first year, it was really hands-on. The second year, they're like, okay, that's maybe a little bit too hands-on, and like, we haven't seen the impact in churn in that meaningful way. So year two was kind of a switch into a more scaled model where like we really push this idea of the learning center and people self-serving a lot of their training and their education journey, which at that point got a lot of pushback, and was an interesting one. I think year three we try to kind of find that middle ground, of okay, we want to have a really strong learning center. We don't want our CSMs doing all the training, But there are those moments where, like, some of that point and click is important. Like, some of our products are, more challenging to use and, like, not, the most intuitive right away. I think, once you have a basic sense of it, you can do a lot with it. But I think, there is that learning curve. So finding that middle ground, I think, that's kind of the journey we've continued to be on, is like, how do we find that right balance? But I think over the last couple of years, so I think it was 2019, we started our CS Ops program, which I think has played a material impact on the transformation of our program. Like, I think, being able to measure things and being able to really, put value to things, I think is one where in the early days, like, there was churn numbers, there was growth numbers, but like, how can you really, show that customer success drove that? What was the impact? And I think, that was a big question we always got, was like, what is the value of customer success? I think, like, theoretically everyone understood what the team does and why they do it, and that there is a positive impact, but it wasn't as quantified at that point, which I think it makes it harder to have a seat at the table. It makes it a little bit harder to, like, really show the business impact, and be able to, like, really advocate for ourselves with resources and the things that we need. So I would say yes, the creation of the CS Ops department, I think, really changed that trajectory, of being able to think about, okay, how do we measure this? How do we measure business outcomes from the work that we're doing? And how do we, like, ensure that our customer success managers are doing the right activities? And that's been, I think, the big journey of the last 3 or so years, is really understanding that customer journey and realizing what are the key touch points that drive business value, and what are the touch points that don't impact business value, and how can we build our model around those touch points that drive value. We now call those our key customer moments, and like that, I would say, is kind of where we've gotten to today, is this place where it is much more mature. It's very much, every CSM, again, they're not doing everything exactly the same, but there's a standardized framework and a way of measuring CSMs, a way of showing CSM value, a way of reporting on all of this that is standardized across teams, and across regions, obviously with nuances. But I think that's really where we've gotten, is like, every customer should have a somewhat similar experience. Again, every customer needs something different, but like, there are these, again, key customer moments, where we can drive value. So, and I think that this has been it's been both on the internal side and the external side where we've seen this impact. So I think, I've talked a lot about the internal side of, like, proving value to your organization, proving value of your headcount, proving value of, CSMs. But I think also this idea of being able to empower our CSMs to also prove value to our customers, and be able to make sure that those are the touch points that are the ones that we're really diving into, where it's like, this is the success that you've had. This is the success you want to continue to have, and really helping them to bring our customers on that journey.
I love that. The whole key customer moment paradigm, I think, is really important, because you're viewing the world from your customer's lens, not so much the company's lens. And that's something I've been hearing a lot, and we've been talking about, is customer success historically has been defined by the provider of the solution, but customer value can only be defined by the customer, right? So I'm curious, can you shed a little bit more light on, you mentioned isolating those activities that were not adding value versus activities that were adding value, and how do you build your organization around that? Could you give an example of what was an activity or a hypothesis of something you thought that was going to add value but didn't, and then the flip side of that, what does add value?
Yeah, no, I love that. So I think, yeah, this has definitely been the journey to figure out. And I think, the CS Ops has been so integral in this, because the data is there, but it's about finding it and finding it in the right way. Because, like, we use Dynamics, we're part of the Microsoft family. Like, there is a treasure trove of data in those systems around the type of touch point, the length of touch point, and then you can look at, okay, you did this touch point, they grew, you did this touch point, they churned, and it actually didn't help them. And I think, this was one of the big ways we got away from some of that more training mindset, was kind of being able to show with the data that actually those touch points, well, they have a place from time to time, those actually aren't the ones that correlate to growth, and to, a reduce in churn, and like, customers finding that value. So that was really the journey we went on. And that was the hypothesis we thought, and the hypothesis we were hoping for, is that like that would show out in the data, that like, it's more of these reviews and like success planning, and success plan type conversations where you empower, your counterparts at the customer to like, help you to define success, help them to drive success within their own organizations, where you're again, we're not totally getting rid of that, like, user first engagement. But I think, that was a big hypothesis we were trying to find and see if that was the case. And the data did prove it out. So again, like, we're now more focused on success reviews, success planning, and those moments where we are helping to show the customer how we are helping them meet their business goals. We've gone on this big journey. We now call them standardized customer objectives, of like, what are the things that our customers are trying to achieve, and how do we know what that is, and then how can we help them on that journey so that they achieve that, and how do we help them measure that?
Totally. Difficult to do that, right? Get them to talk about their goals. I have one more follow-up, and then we'll go to the next section here. How are you doing that today with capturing their business outcomes, right? And what does that process look like?
The business outcomes is an interesting one. I think, we've struggled in some places. I think we're really strong in one place where like, and I think this one is one in terms of measuring value. If you have a first party way to do that, it's a total game changer. And we do have one way to do that within our platform. So within LinkedIn, we can obviously tell when someone updates their LinkedIn profile that they've joined a new company. And so we can tell, so our big ROI metric is called influenced hires, which is saying the person that you hired, your LinkedIn investment influenced that hire. So, you sent them an email, they applied to your job, they engaged with your content on the platform. So us being able to see that happening and then see that person update their profile to now be working for your company, that's allowed us to, with some of our biggest, business lines and products, to be able to really show that value of like, hey, you're like, you've made 50% of your hires on LinkedIn, and your solution has impacted, X number of people joining your organization. I think, some of our currently the product that I'm working on, it's a little more challenging. So I work on this data visualization platform, where it's like most of the things you're doing from the data does not happen in the platform. Like you take that data, you present it to your hiring manager, you present that to your board. And so for us, quantifying that has been more challenging because you don't have that first party data. Right. So I think that's where, if you can find that first party data of the influence you've had, it's super powerful, because I think to the point earlier of like doing that discovery around what are your goals, and then also a discovery around, have we helped you meet your, like if you have to ask the question, have we helped you meet your goals, it's going to be a much more challenging conversation than if you can show that from your own data set.
Totally. Yeah. When you get to this amorphous world where you don't have that attribution, it is discovery based, it is curiosity consulting based, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes here. But it's so critical too to have that, to align with your buyer on what is important, and then map that to what your solution's effectiveness really is. So it's top of mind for so many people right now, and it's great to hear that you all are cracking that nut. Awesome. So let's switch gears here a little bit, Ezra, and I want to dive into your personal journey, because we've talked about the professional side and how LinkedIn has really shaped its organization. But let's hear about you. So can you talk to us? And imagine I'm a individual trying to break into CS, right? Or trying to advance my career. What was the connectivity between your different life moments, and how did you realize what you wanted to do next, and navigating all that?
Yes, great question. And yeah, I mean, I would say my career before LinkedIn was much less thought out. I think after LinkedIn, I think, they do put a big emphasis on professional development, on kind of helping you to think about, we call it your next play, of like what you're going to do next. I would say it's a big topic of conversation for our teams. I think like, early on, I think, what helped me get into LinkedIn was like, as you mentioned, I started working in sports. my role was like super intense, client focused, cold call, like really going it like we're trying to sell Mets tickets, making 80 calls a day. So I think like, when I got to LinkedIn, like that was one of the things that stood out. It's like they want people who are not afraid to pick up the phone, willing to have those conversations, and like, is client centric. So I think that helped me break in. I would say, one of the big pieces of advice I give to folks, which did not happen in my case, is like, industry specific can be really powerful. Of like, if you work in healthcare, for example, like, going to a healthcare startup that you're working with clients who are similar to yourself, I think is like my biggest tip for folks breaking in. But I think, yeah, for me, I think that helped me get in. Is like, I was very customer focused. I'd been working with customers, for a couple of years. The role I was coming in, it was like this new sort of entry level role at LinkedIn. So was able to break in. They hired 20 people in New York at the time, so they were looking for a lot of different backgrounds. And then from there, it was kind of figuring out what I want to next. So this is my 5th job at LinkedIn. So for there, it's really been a journey. I think for me, like why I have stayed for this long is like I've never done one specific job for more than 2.5 years or so. And so, yeah, as you mentioned, like I started in small business customer success, kind of entry level, rolling up the sleeves, doing it. I knew I wanted to kind of stay in customer success, see what it was like, but I wanted to get a new experience. And I like this idea. I always have a little, entrepreneurial vibes to myself. And there was a product that was just launching within LinkedIn called Elevate, which was this marketing platform that helped companies to have their employees share more content across social media as a new marketing channel for companies. Employee advocacy is what we called it. And for me, like I loved using the platform. It was really cool. And like I knew it was something new. They were kind of building it, still a pretty small team. So all of those things really intrigued me. Of like, okay, this seems cool. I like the platform. I like that they're like trying new things. So I started meeting with a couple of folks on that team. Like I think that's for me is like, how I think about some of these next roles is like really to do a lot of discovery around like what is the actual role, how does the team set up, and I think like those one-to-one conversations I would say have shaped my career. Like there's a couple key moments that I think have like played. One of them, that's actually I was on the way back. So LinkedIn has a bunch of like intramural sports teams. I was on the way back from one of our soccer games with the woman who was on this team that I would join a couple months later, and like getting to hear from her about what they're working on, what the model is like was fascinating for me. So I think like some of those random moments, and they've happened a couple times. I'll mention another one later on where it's like kind of sparked my curiosity around a role, and then like from there it's all about digging in and like trying to get as many perspectives as I can, both to like inform myself and also to help myself in the interview process of like having that deep foundation. So I joined that team, spent a couple years there. Around that time is when I started thinking about international moves. So I was in New York at that point, in LinkedIn's Empire State Building office, starting to think about moving to Europe and what that might look like. I really enjoy that like entrepreneurial like startup within LinkedIn, we like to call, where it's like you have the backing of a large organization, but you have some more of that freedom of that more startup-y vibe. So I really like that. And at this point I was thinking about, okay, like how am I going to get to Europe? Like they're not the most straightforward moves. Like I would say, like for an American, like for a company in Europe, there's not a huge benefit of them hiring Americans. I think like bringing knowledge over is an interesting one, but like, they probably have folks in the US supporting US customers. So like, hiring local talent to meet with local customers, I think goes a long way as well. So it took me a bit to finagle it. But this is when I had my next kind of, like that moment that kind of sparked this next move. One of the women that I started at LinkedIn with, we are actually so LinkedIn throws this big conference every year called Talent Connect, where we invite some of our biggest customers to come together. And it's like it's our big conference. So I've been once, and that year it was in Anaheim. And I just happened to be hanging out at the conference, and I ran into this woman that I had worked with, who had joined the team that I would join next. And she was telling me how it was amazing, kind of similar startup-y vibes. They were hiring in Europe and had already thought about moving some folks over. And coincidentally, her boss was also at the conference. So at that conference, I was able to connect with both of them, like again, learn a bit more of the role. And I think this is where that light bulb moment happened for me around that connectivity of like, I know these customers. So the customers for my current role are similar to my first job. So it's like the recruiting foundation for my first job was there, and I knew that customer base really well. And then it had this startup-y vibe, which was similar to the role I was in at the time. So like those two things together made me a very strong candidate, and for me something that like I thought would bring my experiences really well together. And that possibility of moving to Europe. So all of those things kind of came together in that moment. I interviewed for the role. And yeah, about 5 years ago, moved over to Dublin. And then I think like my last role, so I moved over here as an individual contributor. I was supporting the UK market, was in London quite a bit, supporting customers. About a year into the role, I kind of had this realization that like, I think being a manager would be a good next step and something that like I would like to focus on. And that's where like for me, I really started to focus on that. And it was a couple year journey of like really understanding what that was going to take. And then about 2 years ago now, I became a manager, started leading this team. So the Talent Insights team is my team. I oversee EMEA and LATAM. And so yeah, that's been my journey through this, and kind of building on each experience with interests, and learning from interesting people along the way.
Wow. One key piece I take away from that is every relationship that is personal or professional can definitely shape the other side, right? Like the soccer game in New York, I can visualize that. I've been there, right? And you're having fun, having a good time in the city, and then you have a conversation that takes you on a whole different trajectory. It's really awesome, and it goes to show that there doesn't need to be these walls between every part of our life. Like we can enjoy each other's community and company, and it can all be a win-win. So it's a great story, man, and I'm sure a lot of people will.
I think getting involved in like networking in creative ways has played a big role in my career, of like meeting people through like different and interesting situations. Like I always got involved when I was in the New York office, more so of like running some of these cultural and different types of events. I think some of the people I met through that like definitely helped to shape my career, and like were some of those relationships. So yeah, 100%. Like I think being willing to have that mix of personal, professional in different ways can be really powerful.
I love it. I love it. Cool. Well, we're going to take a slightly different direction here and kind of jump back into, I guess, professional world, but more on your lens in it. And I want to call out that Ezra wrote a really awesome article on LinkedIn called The Two Dimensions of Value for Customer Success. And fascinating, because I totally agree with it. I'll link it in the comments, but it's about customer success, or value has to be proven to your customers, obviously, but also to your organization, right? To justify the efforts you're making. And I think really core to this is maybe breaking out the roles a little bit to say you've got your core CS motion, and then maybe you have a specialized consulting world, right, which can help navigate. So can you talk about that piece of it, right? How can CS organizations specialize but still maintain the core operations they need to execute for their customers?
Yep, I love this question, and it's something I've been thinking about more and more as my team. We are this specialist team. We focus on this one play. We do have it at LinkedIn, CSMs who are more generalists, and it's been a great journey of figuring out where our niche is, and to your point, how we prove value. And I think like the first thing on this value journey on the internal side is like having a really deep understanding of why you're specializing. I think if that conversation and that reason doesn't exist early on, I think justifying your team through macroeconomic situations, through like some of these different moments can be more challenging. So I think that's really, I think, in terms of that value, is like, why are we starting this, and what is the impact that we're hoping to have? So again, as these teams mature, it's like what are the metrics that we're looking at that will prove success for these teams, and how do we make sure that these teams are providing impact? Like, I think, that's always the question, because I think, you can specialize too soon, and like, spin up these teams that, you hire all this new headcount, and then, what actually, like, they may not have the impact that you were hoping for. So I think knowing why you want to specialize and like the value you're hoping to bring, is a key part as you go on this journey. And I think, one of the big places we see specialization start is like, where is the fire right now? Like, where is the biggest problem within your CS department? And how can a specialist team fix that? So, okay, is your onboarding flow not working? And like, it's causing massive problems that like folks aren't onboarded well, and then the whole life cycle is thrown off. Or, actually onboarding is going really well, but like that value conversation, that renewal is going poorly. So do we need someone in the back of the life cycle? So I think, that's where I see, so LinkedIn, for example, like our first specialist team was around implementation. So like we started selling these very large deals that were creating huge headaches for CSMs to implement, as it was a big change management in the type of deals that were coming through. So that was like the need. It's like, okay, we're really struggling. We're worried that these customers are not going to be set up well. These are our biggest and like most strategic customers. We don't want them to have a bad experience. So we kind of started there, and then, went downhill from there, or not downhill, but kind of, snowballed from there of like, what are some of these other places? So for my team, it was really around, the platform we do is really data heavy. And like, we don't hire CSMs necessarily for data savviness. There's a lot of things we do hire them for. They do amazing things, but like that data centricity was not one of the main things that we look for in CSMs. So that's where we thought, okay, this product is going to need a specialist team, because it does not directly play to the strengths of our current CSMs. So I think that's the other place where I think specialization is important. And we see it on the technical side as well. Like, if your CSMs aren't technical and you're bringing a technical integration or part of your product to market, having a technical team who can speak that language is really important. But again, it's to that value key. It's like, what are we doing here? Like, we want to see more integration. So, okay, we're going to want a technical team who's going to drive that, and then we can measure that. Or, we want to see, like, for my team, we do have this model where we're able to look at, the growth and the churn rates based on a company engaging with our team. So again, like, we are looking for our platform to become stickier and to grow based on our team engaging with them. So that's the type of metrics that we're looking at to drive value internally. So I think, yeah, a couple different examples of there for like some different teams of like, thinking about why we're doing this, and then how do you continue to measure the success of that throughout the process.
Yeah, the intention is critical, I feel, and understanding what the company's business objectives are too, so you can start to map that to the customers. And it's always a moving on both sides, right, to kind of align the product market fit and the go-to-market fit there. I think that's really important, especially around the implementation, onboarding, these moments that are very intensive customer engagement to ensure that they're getting to those key milestones. You have to. That was my background, at least. I was in implementation, so all I did is, the first 3 months of a customer's life with us that was me. I did that, handed it over to somebody else who would be the general CS and managing the relationship ongoing. So that really resonates. Awesome. Well, we're gonna close out the main question section of the show here and go into an audience favorite, which is the rapid fire questions. So the goal of this is I'm gonna throw a question out at you, Ezra, and you've got first thought that comes to your mind, 1 to 2 words. I know it's gonna be tough, but blurt it out, and curious to hear what you have to say about these questions.
Love it.
All right, here we go. What's the best metric of success for CS?
Business outcomes.
Amazing. Worst metric of success for CS?
I'm going to go with CSAT.
Heck yeah. Most underrated part of CS?
It's the people. They're amazing.
It's all about the people, man. What about the most overrated part of CS?
I think being asked to do a little bit of everything. Maybe what you signed on for, maybe what you didn't.
Yeah, the scope sprawl, right? Current state of CS?
I think we're in this amazing maturation stage toward a more like standardized way of doing things, which I'm excited about.
All right. What about the future of CS?
I mean, the world's AI today, so I got to go AI enhanced.
AI enhanced. Yeah, so we'll double click into that in a second. What is the best CS book / podcast?
So personally, I'm more of a short form person, but I do have to give a shout out to Daphne Costa-Lopez from HubSpot. I feel like all of her content, spot on, LinkedIn, podcasts, she's everywhere. I feel like she's a couple steps ahead of the world. So big shout out to her.
Awesome. And then finally, what's the best community for CS leaders?
Yes, love the community space. So for me, I spent a lot of time with the Customer Success Network, so got to give a plug there. Has been really helpful for me in my networking journey.
Love it, love it. All right, let's go into the future question again. This show is called Future Customer Value, so we got to talk about the future. So if you could make one prediction about where we're headed as an industry, what's coming down the pike, what would you say?
So I think, back to the AI point, I think, this rise in AI, the rise in digital customer success, I think, it's going to be this great transformation where CSMs can focus less on some of the admin and scale work and really allow them to focus on customers, bringing specific customer value, really getting deep on those business objectives to be able to bring that value, but being able to have their bandwidth and time freed up with these things taking some of that off their plate. So I'm really bullish on the power AI and digital can have to make the CS role, to my earlier point of like more unified what it is around creating customer value, so that CSMs can really focus on that instead of a little bit of everything.
Focus on what matters, right? Let the AI maybe be the generalist or the specialist, depending on the situation, so you can focus on the human being across the screen. I love it. All right. Well, I know you are also in the content space, so I want to give you a chance to plug anything you're working on with the audience. I mentioned the value article, which you all should check out, but what are you working on, and how can the audience find out about it?
Love it. Yes. So I would say my consistent content is within my Customer Success Monthly LinkedIn newsletter. I would say, being a LinkedIner, LinkedIn is my biggest play space. I would say I try to post as consistently as I can. And I do have my newsletter, which I try to get out consistently. I'm also part of the Customer Success Network, so definitely recommend joining. There's a workplace group where folks are sharing great content. But yeah, there's so many great communities and places within customer success. So I would say those are some, but yeah, LinkedIn's the hub for me.
All right. Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much, Ezra. This was fantastic. I think a really, really cool view into your world personally, the world of LinkedIn. And you don't often get a chance to see it from that side, right? Where we're always on LinkedIn, but somebody who's in the who's working there and giving your perspectives is really awesome to hear. So thank you so much, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Love it. Thanks for having me. This was awesome.